The cabin lantern flickered low. The cowboy leaned close, reaching for his new bride. Her hand slid under the blanket and came back with a knife. Steel caught firelight. His breath froze. What had he married into? The blade's edge hovered inches from his chest. The cowboy's hand stopped mid-reach, hanging in the air like a man who'd grabbed a rattler by the tail. "Easy," he muttered, voice dry as dust. The widow didn't blink. Her dark eyes locked on his, steady, unreadable. The knife didn't tremble. "You traded me for a horse," she said, tone flat as stone. "What makes you think you own the night too?" The lantern popped, shadows jerking across log walls. His heart kicked like a bronc in a chute. "We said vows," he tried, quieter now. "Judge signed the paper." Her lips curved, nothing like a smile. "Paper burns." The cowboy swallowed. The whole deal had seemed simple in daylight. She was a widow, alone, shunned. He was desperate, needed a horse, any horse to keep the herd together. One bargain later, he had both a mount and a wife. Now, under the low roof of his cabin, he realized the trade had come with teeth. Her knife traced the air, slow, deliberate. "You want to touch me," she whispered. "First, tell me whose blood stains your boots." He glanced down. Dust, not blood. Still, his chest tightened. "I'm no killer." "Liar." She leaned closer, blade grazing his shirt. "Every man in this valley owes bones to the ground. Which ones are yours?" His back brushed the wall. Heat pressed from the lantern, from her breath, from the steel waiting to split him. He forced a crooked grin, masking fear. "If you mean Caldwell's boys, they bled me first." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, memory, maybe rage. She lowered the knife a finger's breadth, but not away. "Good," she said. "Then you'll understand." "Understand what?" The widow leaned back, knife still bare. Her gaze flicked to the door. Beyond it, the wind hissed through cottonwoods. Horses stamped restlessly in the corral. A sound followed, one that didn't belong. Leather creaking, spurs dragging. The cowboy's head snapped toward the noise. Shadows shifted under the door crack. She didn't sheath the knife. She smiled this time, thin and sharp. "Our wedding guests just arrived." The cowboy blew the lantern lower until the flame was a coin. Outside, leather creaked again, spurs dragged. A horse snorted hard through its nose. He slid a palm toward the rifle by the door. "Leave it," she said. He glanced at the knife in her hand. "You planning to greet him with that? It's more honest than paper." Another drag of spurs across the porch. A knuckle rapped the wood. 3 slow knocks. The cowboy's throat tightened. "You expecting company?" "They follow vows more than blood," she said. "They came for the horse or for me, usually both." He moved sideways, back to the wall, eyes on the latch. "You know them." "I know their kind." She nodded at his boots. "Move quiet." "Who are you?" he asked. "Your wife," she said, deadpan. "For now." The voice at the door came smooth and dry. "Evening, groom. Congratulations. Bride inside?" The cowboy answered without thinking. "Who's asking?" "The man who supplied your dowry." Silence pressed. The cowboy looked at her. "You traded me a horse that wasn't yours." She didn't blink. "He sold you a horse that wasn't his." Knuckles rapped again, lighter this time. "Open up, married man. We don't like to knock twice." The cowboy whispered. "How many?" She tilted her head, listening. 4. 1 heavy, 1 patient, 1 too young, 1 who talks too much. You can tell that from boots, from breathing." He winced. "You always talk like a riddle. When men deserve the answer, I give it." He edged toward the door. She caught his sleeve. "You open, you bleed." "Then what?" he hissed. "Lantern," she said. "Blow it out. Count to 5. Open on my word." He hesitated. "And if your word gets me killed?" Her eyes held his, flat and steady. "Then I bury you with your rifle." He killed the light. Shadows swallowed the cabin. Smoke from the wick hung sweet and bitter. Outside, the smooth voice sharpened. "Last call, groom," she whispered. "Now." He slid the latch up and ripped the door wide. Wind punched through. 4 shapes stood close, backlit by a wash of moon. The woman was already moving. The knife flashed. She slashed the front man's belt and yanked, torches and pistol clattering to the floorboards. With her other hand, she shoved the cowboy low behind the table. Gunfire barked wild from the yard. The second man fired through the open door. Her knife caught his wrist with a snap. The pistol flew. He howled, stepping back off the porch. "Close it," she hissed. The cowboy kicked the door half shut. A boot jammed the gap. A shoulder hit hard. The cabin shuddered. "Lantern!" the smooth voice laughed from the dark. "Let's see her face." "No," the woman said, and drove her blade down through the boot leather. The man screamed and jerked away. She slammed the door and dropped the bar. Silence a beat. Wind in cottonwood leaves. Horses stamping. Then the heavy one spoke, voice like gravel. "Widow, you owe us a mount and a saddle." She leaned close to the door. "Then come take them." The cowboy swallowed. "They know you. They know my knife. Why didn't you tell me this at the judge's table? You were busy counting." Bootsteps shifted outside. The young one's voice shook. "She cut Tom's foot." The talker snapped. "Then we cut her throat." The heavy voice said, "Not on the porch, not on a wedding night. Boss wants it tidy." The cowboy mouthed, "Boss." His stomach went cold. "Caldwell?" "Caldwell has many hands," she said. "Not all clean. You could have told me before I said I do. You didn't ask." She pulled a strip of leather from her skirt hem and bound the knife to her forearm, hilt snug against her pulse. "Now listen. They'll circle for the window. The loud one first. Shoot the quiet one." "How do I tell?" he whispered. "You'll feel him," she said simply. He almost laughed. "That a promise or a curse?" "Yes," Glass whispered. A shadow rose under the side window. The cowboy fired on instinct. Wood exploded. A man cursed and crashed into the rain barrel. "Wrong one," she said, and kicked the table toward the window as a second barrel nudged up. The bullet thudded into pine instead of lung. The heavy voice again, closer to the corner. "Groom, do right by your vows. Send her out. Keep the horse. Keep your life." The cowboy called back, "I made a trade. I don't break paper." "You broke it when you lit the lantern," the man said. The widow spoke through the seam of the door. "What did you trade for your mother? Boy who talks. Did you sell her for a rope and a drink?" "I ain't a boy," the talker snapped. Her tone turned softer, almost curious. "Then why do you sound like one?" The young one swore under his breath. Spurs scuffed away across the porch. The cowboy leaned in. "What is this to you? Pride? Revenge?" "Debt," she said. "Men think they can buy it off." "They can't. Your husband died to them?" he asked. She didn't answer. The knife on her arm gleamed faintly. That was answer enough. A whisper of cloth brushed the roof. The cowboy's skin prickled. "Above. Left corner," she said. He swung the rifle that way and held. The roof creaked. The barrel of a carbine nosed past the eave. He fired. The gun clattered off the shingles. A body thumped into dust just beyond the porch. The heavy voice hissed, "No humor now. You've made enough noise for the whole valley." "Invite 'em," the cowboy called. "I'll marry them too." She smirked at that, brief and hard. The boy outside whimpered, "Tom's leaking. Hank." "Shut up," the talker snapped. Boots moved. A horse blew. The men regrouped. The widow's voice dropped to a thread. "They'll set the house on fire next." The cowboy blinked. "My roof just got paid for." "Paper burns," she said again. His jaw set. "Why the knife on our wedding night?" "Because I wanted to see your eyes before the firelight did," she said. "You can tell what a man is by how he looks at steel." He stared at her. "And what am I?" "Hungry," she said. "Not cruel. That matters." A bottle clinked outside. Oil sloshed. "Down," she snapped. He dragged her with him as a lit rag arced through the open chink and hit the far wall. Flames licked old resin and climbed. Heat washed across the room fast as gossip. The talker laughed. "Wedding bonfire." The heavy voice. "Stay ready. She runs, she falls." The cowboy lunged for the bucket. She caught his wrist. "No time. Back door. Back door's a shot tunnel. Then we make a different one." She kicked the bed aside, dropped to her knees, and hooked her fingers under the plank seam. The board lifted. Beneath, a crawl space cut through hardpan. He stared. You dug a tunnel. I plan ahead, she said, and slid the knife free of her wrist. Feet first. Keep your head low. He grabbed the rifle and shoved his shoulders into the dark. Earth pressed tight. Heat chased. Smoke curled under the floor and clawed his throat. Boots hit the porch again. The heavy voice sounded inches above. She'll bolt. Knives always bolt. The widow's whisper grazed his ear in the crawl space. Move! He wriggled forward, dragging the rifle. Splinters scraped his back. Fire licked louder. Behind, she eased the plank down, just enough shadow to hide their hole. Outside, oil hissed. The flames leapt the window. The cabin roared. They reached the far end, where the crawl space ended in a crude trap near the root of a cottonwood. She shoved up. Dirt gave. Night poured in. Hurry, she breathed. He heaved himself out, grabbed her wrist, and hauled. She slid free, eyes watering, hair streaked in soot. Across the yard, 4 silhouettes turned in unison toward the flicker behind them, guns up, attention on the door that was no longer their target. The heavy one said, "Now," and a 5th silhouette stepped out from behind the corral, close, quiet, a pistol already leveled at the cowboy's heart. The pistol glinted silver in the moonlight, close, steady, aimed right at the cowboy's chest. The man who held it wasn't one of the 4. He was lean, clean boots, hat brim low, and his stance wasn't desperate, it was trained. The widow froze beside the cowboy, eyes narrowing. "Not theirs," she whispered. The stranger's voice was calm. "Step away from her." The cowboy's grip tightened on the rifle. His mouth dried. "And if I don't, then I drop you," the stranger said simply. The widow tilted her head, studying him. "You wear no brand, no ranch mark." "I don't ride for brands," the stranger replied. His pistol never wavered. "I ride for debts." The heavy one on the porch called out, "Who the hell's out there?" The stranger didn't answer him. His eyes stayed on the cowboy. "You married a widow who owes blood. That makes you part of her debt." The cowboy's stomach twisted. "And who do you collect for?" The man's smile was slight, sharp. "The ones she buried." For a beat, silence stretched. Even the fire snapping inside the cabin seemed to fade. The cowboy tried to read the widow's face, but she gave him nothing. "You planning to shoot me for vows I barely said?" he asked. The stranger's gaze flicked to the widow. "I plan to see if you're worth her knife." The widow spoke then, her voice low but cutting. "You could have come inside with the others. Instead, you waited. Why?" "Because I wanted him alive to answer." The cowboy snapped. "Answer what?" The stranger shifted the pistol an inch higher. "When the fire comes, when the ground shakes, do you run or do you carry?" The widow's eyes locked on the cowboy's. Her knife gleamed again in her fist. "Well, husband, what's your answer?" The cowboy's pulse thudded. He thought of his burned roof, of the horse tied in the corral, of the vows said with dust on his tongue. He thought of the knife flashing on their wedding night. His voice came rough. "I carry." The stranger studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered the pistol. "We'll see." From the porch, the heavy voice barked again, angrier. "Talk's done. Burn it all." Another bottle shattered against the wall. Flames surged higher. The 4 men shouted, spurring their horses around, circling like wolves. The widow grabbed the cowboy's arm. "Move! Riverbed!" They sprinted low across the yard. Bullets cracked, whining through the dark. Dirt spat up near the boys' corral, horses screaming. The cowboy shoved her ahead, rifle firing wild cover shots. The stranger melted into the shadows, his pistol barking once. Clean, precise. One of the circling horses screamed, bucking its rider into the dirt. The widow dove behind the cottonwoods, dragging the cowboy with her. "This way," she hissed. They dropped into the dry cut of a riverbed, the world above lit orange by flames. They landed hard, dust clouded. The cowboy coughed, clutching his rifle. He looked at her, eyes burning. "Who is he?" Her knife rested on her knee, steady despite the sprint. "A ghost with a pistol." "I don't need riddles." "You'll get truth when it's ready," she said. Shouts rang above them. Boots scrambled on dirt. The men were circling down. The fire lit the night too bright to hide long. The cowboy's jaw tightened. We can't keep running blind. The widow's gaze flicked toward the stranger's silhouette, now moving along the ridge with uncanny ease, always just out of sight but never gone. She said nothing, but her grip on the knife tightened. Then, footsteps in the bed of the river, close, heavy. The cowboy raised his rifle. The widow's hand shot out, pushing the barrel down. "Not yet," she breathed. A shadow fell over them. Spurs jangled. A torch flared. The heavy man dropped into the cut, pistol already drawn. He smiled, teeth catching firelight. "Found you, bride?" The cowboy's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, the widow stepped forward, knife low, blade gleaming, her eyes locked on the man. "You found more than that," she said. The heavy man's smile widened. "Then show me." Steel and fire caught between them, and the cowboy realized this wasn't just her fight. It was the start of something deeper, something tied to debts older than his marriage, older than his desperation, and he had no idea if he'd live long enough to understand it. The heavy man dropped into the dry riverbed with a grunt, torch in one hand, pistol in the other. He smiled like a butcher. "Bride," he said, "you took a horse that wasn't yours." The widow stepped forward, knife low. "Then take it back." He laughed. "After I take fingers." The cowboy lifted his rifle. Gravel slid under his boots. "Easy," the heavy man warned, pistol steady. "You move, I plant iron in your wedding suit." The stranger's silhouette slid along the rim above them, silent, watching, not intervening. The heavy man's torch spit. His face swam in orange and shadow. "Caldwell don't like women who think knives beat paper. He wants his mount. He wants her back on the ledger." The cowboy frowned. "Ledger?" The widow didn't look away from the gun. "He writes women like cattle, marks the widows who won't kneel." The heavy man grinned, showing a gold molar. "And you're the first who married to dodge it." The cowboy's stomach turned. "You married me for a horse and a name." Her eyes flicked to him once. "For a horse, a name, and a witness with a spine." The heavy man barked a laugh. "She played you, groom." "Should have read the small print." Heat crawled up the cowboy's neck. "We can discuss the small print later. Later is for people who live," the heavy man said, taking a step. "Give me the knife, bride. Turn and put your hands where I can see 'em." She didn't move. Her voice dropped soft. "Hank." The heavy man blinked. "How you know my name?" "It's carved in my handle," she said. "Under 3 others." He squinted at the knife hilt. Notches ran down the wood like tally marks. 4 were cut deep and blackened. The 5th was shallow. Waiting. Hank's grin faltered. "You carving stories or threats?" "Debts," she said. The cowboy slid his foot, testing the sand. "We don't have to bleed. Take another horse. Leave." Hank's pistol stayed dead steady. "Not how ledgers work, groom." Above, the stranger's voice floated down, mild. "Your man's right about one thing, widow." "He's due." Hank's head snapped up. "Who?" The widow moved. Steel blinked. She slashed at the torch hand first. Flame fell, hissing into dust. Darkness punched in. Hank fired blind. The shot boomed down the cut. The cowboy dove. Heat flashed past his ear. He slammed the rifle butt into Hank's wrist. Bone cracked. The pistol flew, spinning into gravel. Hank roared and swung the other fist. It caught the cowboy's jaw, white light popping behind his eyes. The cowboy staggered, tasted iron, and drove his shoulder into Hank's gut. They hit hard. Sand exploded. The widow slid in low, a ghost in the dark, and cut behind Hank's knee. He dropped to one leg, snarling. He swept a forearm wide and clipped her ribs. She grunted, rolled, came up again, blade ready. "Help!" the young one yelled from above. Boots scrambled along the rim. "Hold!" the heavy voice. Hank growled to his men, breath ragged. "I'll take my gift." He lunged. The cowboy met him, both hands on the rifle like a staff. Wood smacked knuckles and cheek. Hank spat blood. He grabbed the barrel, yanked. The cowboy yanked back. The rifle bent between them like a wishbone about to break. The widow stepped in tight, too tight for a slash. She flipped the knife in her palm and punched the pommel into Hank's throat. He gagged, eyes bulging. The stranger's pistol coughed once from the rim. The young one above yelped and fell back out of sight. gun clattering. Hank coughed, sucking air. "You witch." "Widow," she said. He blinked, seeing her for the first time like a man sees a cliff too late. "You ain't hiding from Caldwell. You're hunting." She didn't deny it. "Why?" the cowboy rasped, still straining on the rifle. "Tell me straight." "Because he wrote my name," she said, eyes never leaving Hank, then crossed it out. Hank understood. The grin died for good. "You were on his ledger. Then your husband burned with his herd," she finished, voice flat. "They called it law." Hank snorted blood. "Then you won't stop till you cut him." "I won't stop," she agreed, "but I choose how." Hank's good hand darted to his belt. Steel flashed, another blade, short and thick. He swung for her belly. The cowboy jerked the rifle sideways into the swing. Hank's knife skated off wood and sliced his own forearm instead. Pain flared. He swore, grip weakening. The widow stepped left, away from the blade, and carved a clean line across Hank's palm. Blood splashed into the sand. She lifted the knife, red running down the hilt, and pressed her thumb into the cut. "Debt paid," she said. "Not by death, by proof." Hank stared, dumb. "What proof?" She grabbed his bleeding wrist and slammed it against the riverbed wall. The smear streaked bright across pale clay, a mark like a signature. "Your hand says who sent you." Hank's laugh came out a cough. "You think red on rock scares Caldwell?" "No," she said, "but it teaches men who ride for him that their names last longer in clay than on paper." The cowboy panted, ribs aching, and realized the secret wasn't a curse or magic in the blade, it was a practice. A ledger she was carving into the land, one hand at a time. Boots hit the slope. The talker slid down, wild-eyed, firing from the hip. Sparks jumped off stone. The stranger's gun whispered again. The shot clipped the talker's hat clean off and sent him scrambling back up like a spooked calf. "Patient one's still out," the stranger called from above. "You won't hear him till he wants you to." Hank took that moment to slam his forehead into the cowboy's nose. Stars burst. The cowboy fell to a knee. Hank surged up, rearing his other fist. The widow cut one more time, quick, bright, across Hank's cheek. A shallow mark, cruel and neat. "Fifth notch," she said softly. Hank froze. His breath hitched. The knife hovered at his throat like a promise. "Run," she said. He blinked. "You ain't—" "Run," she repeated. "Take the boy who talks. Tell whoever owns your papers what clay holds. If you come back, I carve deeper." Hank staggered, torn between pride and breath, pride lost. He spun, scrambling up the bank on hands and knees, blood dripping a dotted line behind him. Silence fell hard. Smoke drifted over the cut like a lazy river. The cowboy wiped his nose. It came away red. "You let him go," he said. "I kept you alive," she said, "and I bought us time." He stared at the smear on the river wall. "That your secret? Not killing? Marking?" "My secret is, I don't waste bullets on men who can carry the story for me," she said. Then she reached for his wrist. "Give me your hand." He hesitated. "Why?" "You said you carry," she murmured. "Blood says if you meant it." She pricked his palm with the tip, just enough to sting, and pressed their hands together, palm to palm. Warmth. Iron. She wrapped a strip of leather around both wrists, binding them for a breath, then let go. "Now you're in it," she said. The stranger dropped into the cut at last, landing light. He looked at their joined wrists, then at the smear on clay. "You just signed with more than paper, groom." "I noticed," the cowboy muttered, flexing his hand. The stranger's gaze shifted past them, deeper down the riverbed. "Move." "Why?" the cowboy asked. A rope snapped tight around his ankle and yanked him off his feet. He slammed backward, air gone. Gravel scraped his spine. The world flipped, sky, cliff, fireglow, and he dangled upside down from a snare hidden in the willow roots. From the shadowed bend, a soft voice finally spoke, the patient one, calm, close. "Don't carry her another step." The rope cut into his ankle, swinging him like fresh kill. Blood rushed to his head, vision swimming. The cowboy clawed at the rope, rifle fallen out of reach. The widow spun toward the sound, knife raised. The patient one stepped into moonlight. Slim's quiet boots, long coat that didn't rustle. No grin, no bark, just stillness. His pistol hung loose at his side, pointed down but ready to rise. "You've made a mess," he said evenly. His voice was almost polite. "Fire in the valley, men bleeding, names carved into dirt. That draws notice." The widow's eyes narrowed. "You laid the snare." He dipped his head once. "Caldwell pays for foresight. And I prefer my hunts tidy." The cowboy twisted, trying to haul himself upright, "Then cut me down and talk like men." The patient one's gaze flicked over him without interest. "You married debt, rancher. Don't be shocked when the rope finds you." The widow stepped closer, blade glinting. "If he bleeds, so do you." He tilted his head, almost admiring. That's what they all said. Before the ledger closed, the stranger, the lean ghost with the steady pistol, spoke from behind them. "Careful. She's already got 4 names carved. You want to be the 5th? The patient one finally looked at him. "You're not Caldwell's, yet you fire on his men. Why?" The stranger's smile was small. "Because debts deserve to be collected both ways." For a heartbeat, the riverbed froze. Cowboy dangling, widow steady, patient one measuring, stranger waiting. Smoke drifted over the lip of the cut, orange glow painting the sky. Then the cowboy jerked hard, swinging his weight. He slammed into the clay wall, grunting, and the rope creaked. "Don't just stand there," he yelled. The patient one sighed. "So noisy." He raised his pistol, slow and calm. Sighting on the cowboy's chest, the widow moved. She slashed upward, blade flashing. The rope severed. The cowboy dropped hard into the dust, air knocked clean out. The pistol cracked a split second too late. Bullet bit clay where his head had been hanging. The widow lunged low, aiming for the patient one's wrist. He stepped back smooth, avoiding her, gun still steady. He fired again, close. The shot scorched air past her cheek. The stranger fired once from the shadows. Sparks leapt from stone near the patient one's boots. He slid back another pace, coat sweeping like smoke. "Not tonight," he said softly. "The ledger's not ready to close." And then he melted into shadow. No run, no scramble, just gone like the night folded around him. The cowboy staggered up, coughing, dirt in his teeth. "What? Where the hell?" The widow's chest heaved. She scanned the shadows with hunter's eyes. Nothing. Only silence. Only the burned sky. The stranger holstered his pistol. "He's patient," he said. "He'll wait till the ground cools, then strike again." The cowboy spat dust. "Why didn't you kill him?" The widow answered for the stranger, voice flat. "Because patience is harder to bury. It always comes back." The cowboy bent, picked up his rifle with shaking hands. His ankle throbbed from the rope burn. "Then what do we do?" The widow glanced at him. "We don't wait for him. We move." "Where?" She looked west, where the riverbed wound into darkness, to the place where the ledger began. The stranger gave a low chuckle. "You're leading him into old ground." Her gaze stayed on the cowboy. "He deserves to know before patience collects." The cowboy felt the weight of her words like iron on his back. Whatever she was hiding, it was heavier than her knife. He gritted his teeth. "Then tell me on the way." Her eyes didn't soften. "You'll see with your own." From the ridge above, a wounded voice wailed. The talker, limping, calling for Hank. Horses, stamped restless. The valley was waking to their fire. The stranger said, "We've got minutes before riders fill this bed." The widow grabbed the cowboy's wrist, pulling him deeper into the cut. "Then we use them." They ran, shadows clinging, the riverbed twisting like a scar. Every few steps, the cowboy glanced back, certain he'd see the patient one's pale face waiting. But the night gave nothing, only the whisper of boots too quiet to track, and the weight of the widow's knife, leading them toward a truth he wasn't sure he wanted. The riverbed bent left, then right, narrowing between walls of clay. Moonlight fell in thin stripes, enough to see but never enough to trust. The widow moved fast, her knife low, eyes flicking to every bend as though she'd walked this path 100 times in her head. The cowboy limped, ankle raw from the rope burn. Each step jolted, but he kept up. "How you going to tell me where we're running?" "West," she said, "where water once ran red." "That don't help." He spat dust, frustration sharp. You married me for a horse, brought a war to my door, and now you drag me through dirt with riddles. She didn't slow. Riddles keep you alive until you earn the truth. The stranger paced them on the ridge above, a silent shadow with his pistol at his thigh. He called down once, voice dry. She's not wrong. Words weigh less than bullets, the cowboy snapped. You're both ghosts speaking in puzzles. What's waiting west? The widow finally stopped. She turned, face caught in a shaft of pale light. Graves, she said, and the names Caldwell scratched out before ink was dry. The cowboy's chest tightened. You mean my husband, my sons, my father, all burned with their herd? She held his gaze. Caldwell called it law. I call it theft by fire. He swallowed hard. Her calm voice cut deeper than screams would have. The stranger spoke again from above. And the ledger, he keeps one, paper and ink, but hers is older. Clay and blood. The cowboy's hand flexed on his rifle. You keep carving men because of that night? She nodded once. Every man who rode with him, every man who fed his fire, I mark. Some walk away, some don't. The cowboy rubbed his jaw, torn between fury and dread. And marrying me? Was that just a way to hide from the rest of them? Her expression didn't shift. It was a way to see if you'd run when the knife came out. He exhaled, sharp. Hell of a test for a wedding night. You passed, she said simply. Then she turned and walked on. The cowboy followed, silent now, thoughts heavy. He remembered the judge smirking at the vows, the way Caldwell's name never left the valley. He realized he hadn't married a widow. He'd stepped into a war written years before his time. A distant shot cracked behind them, then another. The shouts of men rose faint, carried by wind through the canyon. The stranger hissed, They found Hank. He's bleeding but not gone. The widow's jaw tightened. Then the smear held. The cowboy frowned. That's your plan, to bleed them and let them walk back to tell Caldwell. Stories travel faster than bullets, she said. The cowboy shook his head. Stories don't stop lead. She glanced at him. Neither does fear. But memory might. Before he could answer, the ground changed. The clay walls dropped away. The riverbed widened into a basin littered with half-buried timbers, blackened and split. The air stank faintly of char even years later. The cowboy froze. What is this place? The widow stepped into the open, her knife loose in her hand. My wedding night, she said. Charred fence posts jutted from the sand like teeth. A half-collapsed wagon wheel lay crusted with soot, and there at the basin's heart, stones marked mounds no taller than a man's knee. The cowboy's stomach knotted. You brought me to your dead. She touched one stone, fingers steady. I brought you to my truth. The stranger's voice drifted from the ridge. This is where Caldwell wrote his first ledger, fire for ink, flesh for paper. The cowboy swallowed. His throat felt raw. You wanted me to see this. The widow faced him fully, her knife catching moonlight. You asked what debt I carry, now you know. He stared at the stones, the scorched wood, the wide, silent basin. Something in him cracked, like a board splintering under too much weight. He realized she wasn't just hunted. She was hunting with the dead at her back, and by marrying her, he'd been written into the same story. Above them, a whistle cut the night. Short, sharp, practiced. More riders, more boots. The widow's voice hardened. They'll come here. He'll come here. The cowboy tightened his grip on the rifle. His hands shook, but he forced them still. Then what? Then we find out, she said. If you carry more than paper. The stranger reloaded above, a metallic click echoing in the stillness. You wanted the truth, rancher. Now let's see if it keeps you alive. The cowboy felt it between the graves and the embers that the night wasn't near over. It was only sharpening its teeth. The whistle echoed once more, then multiplied into hoofbeats. The cowboy lifted his head and counted by rhythm. 4, maybe 5 riders. The basin walls caught the sound and bent it, making them seem closer than they were. The widow knelt at one mound, pressed her palm flat against the stone. When she rose, her eyes were darker than the night. They'll ride through fire if they have to. He trained them that way. The cowboy swallowed, throat tight. Then we'll make fire burn the wrong side. She looked at him, measuring. For the first time, something softened. A flicker, gone as quick as a spark. "Stay on your feet, husband. Graves don't need company tonight." The stranger on the ridge shifted, crouched low with pistol ready. They're fanning wide. Caldwell doesn't waste men. He circles. The cowboy checked his rifle, fingers clumsy on the lever. Dust coated the barrel, sweat stung his eyes. He forced breath steady, tried to remember hunts from younger years, when wolves came for calves at night. But wolves didn't carry rifles. The hoofbeats drew closer, now punctuated by the rattle of spurs, leather creaking. Then, silence. The widow's head tilted. She whispered, "They've split." The cowboy's gut knotted. "How do you know?" "Because that's how he always comes. He closes like jaws." A faint voice rose in the stillness, a man calling, almost friendly. "Widow, you done enough carving. Caldwell don't want your scalp, just your knife." The cowboy muttered, "Sounds like a trap." The stranger above chuckled once. "Everything's a trap. That's the point." The widow answered the voice, sharp and clear. "Tell Caldwell he can write his own name in clay if he wants it carved." Laughter answered, rolling low across the basin. Then a rifle cracked, echo tearing the air. Dust spat inches from the widow's boots. The cowboy swore, dropped to one knee, and fired blind toward the rim. Echoes smothered his shot. He couldn't tell if he'd hit a thing. "Careful," the stranger barked. "They'll smoke you out if you waste rounds." "Then what?" the cowboy snapped. "Wait till they pick us off like crows." The widow crouched beside him, knife tight in her grip. "No, we bleed them where they stand." She pointed to a half-collapsed wagon, its charred frame leaning against the basin wall. "You drag it. I'll cover. Drag it." His voice cracked. Her eyes cut into him. "Drag it." Another shot screamed close, splintering a wagon wheel. The cowboy gritted his teeth, ran low, and heaved at the blackened frame. Wood groaned, scraping through dirt. Bullets thudded into clay around him. The widow rose tall, knife gleaming, her silhouette taunting against the moon. She didn't throw, she didn't slash. She only stood, daring their eyes to find her. The cowboy dragged the wagon into place, forming a crude barrier. He collapsed behind it, chest heaving. "Done!" She slid beside him, breath even, not a scratch. The stranger fired once from the ridge. A scream followed, cut short. "3 left," he called. The cowboy wiped sweat from his brow, forcing calm. "They won't stop." "No," the widow said, "but they'll learn." Hoofbeats thundered again. One rider broke into the basin, torch high, fire staining his face red. He whooped, pistol firing wild. The widow sprang. She didn't charge the horse, she charged the fire. Knife snapped up, cutting through the torch's shaft. Flames toppled. The rider cursed, blinded, and the horse bucked hard. He tumbled, pistol skittering across the dirt. The cowboy lifted his rifle, sighted, and fired. The rider's hat snapped away, hair flying. The man scrambled, blood streaking his temple, and fled, limping into the dark. The widow bent, seized the torch, and drove it into the wagon frame. Flames licked up the dry wood, rising bright. The cowboy stared. "You're burning our cover." "I'm burning theirs," she said. Smoke rolled thick, curling into the basin air. The riders on the rim lost sight, their shots spraying blind. The stranger laughed softly from above. "She plays mean." The cowboy coughed, eyes watering. "So now what?" The widow pressed the torch into his hands. "Now you carry fire." He blinked, stunned. "Me?" Her stare was iron. "You wanted truth. Truth weighs more than rifles. Now move." The cowboy stood, legs trembling, torch blazing in his grip. Smoke curled around him, painting him in firelight. For a heartbeat, he felt every eye in the valley on his back. A whistle shrieked again from the ridge, riders pulling back, regrouping. The widow's hand touched his shoulder, grounding him. "They'll come harder." The cowboy clenched the torch tighter. For the first time, he didn't feel only fear. He felt the ground choosing sides. Somewhere in the dark, the patient one was waiting, quiet, calm, ledger open. And when he came, the cowboy knew fire wouldn't be enough. The flames clawed higher up the wagon, spitting sparks into the basin air. Smoke rolled, thick and acrid, hiding friend from foe. The cowboy gripped the torch tighter, lungs burning. Somewhere above, horses stamped nervously, riders coughing as their advantage slipped. The widow's voice cut through the haze. "Hold steady. Let them choke on their own circle." The cowboy swallowed hard. "And when they charge through—" Her knife glinted faintly. "Then you'll know if you were worth my vows." Before he could answer, a shot rang sharp. Not blind, not wild. Clean. A slug splintered the wagon near his ear. The widow jerked her head toward the ridge. "He's here." The cowboy's stomach dropped. "The patient one?" She nodded once. "Only he fires that way." The stranger answered with his own pistol from another ridge. His shot cracked, echoing across the basin, but no scream followed. The patient one didn't miss, but neither did he linger. The cowboy dropped low, torch guttering. "How do we fight a ghost?" "You don't," the widow said. Her breath came calm despite the smoke. "You endure until the ghost makes a mistake." The cowboy coughed hard, wiping ash from his eyes. "And if he doesn't, then you're already carved." The smoke shifted, a breeze slipping through. Shapes emerged, riders dismounting, moving on foot. Their boots scraped dirt, rifles steady. Caldwell's men weren't pulling back. They were closing in, slow and sure. The widow crouched beside him, voice tight now. "They'll push into the smoke. Watch the ground, listen, not look." The cowboy forced his shaking hands steady. He pressed the torch low, fire hissing against sand. His rifle lay across his lap, lever ready. His ears strained against the crackle of burning wood. Bootsteps, 2, maybe 3, close. A shadow loomed through the smoke. The cowboy fired. The shape dropped, rifle clattering. Another shape cursed, ducking back. The widow moved like lightning, springing toward the fallen weapon. She slashed wide, steel meeting flesh. A scream tore out. Then silence. She dragged the rifle back to him, shoved it into his hands. "Now you carry more than fire." His chest heaved. Blood splattered the dirt near his boots. He stared at it, throat tight. He'd hunted wolves, butchered cattle. But this was different. The widow's voice cut sharp. "Don't stare. Move." He jerked, snapping back, gripping both rifle and torch. The stranger's voice echoed from above. "2 more circling your north side." The widow muttered, "He'll bleed them, but the patient waits south." The cowboy's breath hitched. "How do you know?" Her eyes flicked to the stones of the grave mounds, barely visible through smoke. "Because he always waits where the dead can hear." A chill crept down his spine. He turned, torchlight throwing jagged shadows, and there a figure stood at the far edge of the basin. Calm, motionless, pistol low at his side. The patient one. He didn't rush, didn't shout, just raised his chin, as if marking the cowboy in some invisible book. The cowboy's throat dried. "He's watching me." The widow's knife tightened in her grip. "Then make him see." The cowboy forced his boots forward, torch blazing. He lifted the rifle, but his hands shook so bad the sights swam. The patient one tilted his head, faint smile forming. He didn't raise his pistol. He didn't need to. His calm was worse than fire. The widow hissed, "Steady, don't give him your fear." The cowboy planted his feet, shoved the torch into the sand at his side. He gripped the rifle with both hands, teeth clenched, sight fixed on that calm figure. The patient one's smile deepened. Then he lifted his pistol. The cowboy fired. The shot split the smoke. Sparks leapt off rock near the patient one's boots. He hadn't hit. The patient one didn't fire back. He only lowered the pistol again, almost gently, and faded backward into the haze. The cowboy's chest heaved. Why didn't he shoot? The widow's voice was flat. "Because he wants you to live long enough to doubt." Above, the stranger barked 2 more shots. A scream followed, boots scattering. "Ridge clear for now," he called. The widow rose, eyes scanning the smoke. "Then we move. West slope. He won't let you breathe long here." The cowboy clenched the rifle, fire still blazing behind him, and stumbled after her. His legs felt heavy, each step dragging the weight of the graves and the gaze of that patient smile. Because for the first time he understood. This wasn't about one night's fight. It was a ledger he'd been written into, and the ink was far from dry. They climbed the west slope, boots sinking into loose sand, lungs still raw with smoke. The cowboy's ankle screamed with every step, but he forced weight onto it. Behind them, the wagon burned like a beacon, flames licking the basin sky. The widow never looked back. Knife in hand, shoulders squared, she moved as if fire had never touched her lungs. The cowboy stumbled after, rifle clutched, heart hammering. Above, the stranger's silhouette paced the ridge. He called low, "2 riders breaking west ahead of you. They're cutting to block." The widow cursed under her breath. "He's tightening jaws." The cowboy gasped. "We can't outrun them." She stopped halfway up the slope, eyes narrowing. "We don't outrun." "If I bleed their teeth." The cowboy stared. "Here, in the open." Her jaw tightened. "Graves were worse ground. This is high." Before he could argue, hoofbeats pounded from the dark above. 2 riders crested the ridge, torches flaring in their fists. The flames cast monstrous shadows down the slope. The widow shoved the cowboy low into the sand. "Rifle ready." The cowboy fumbled the lever, chest heaving. The torchlight blinded his sights, but he forced himself steady. He saw the riders split, one angling left, the other right, rifles raised. The stranger's pistol barked from his ridge. Sparks flew near the left rider's horse, but the man stayed mounted. The widow sprang up, knife flashing, and hurled it into the fire. The torch tumbled, flames scattering. The rider cursed, yanking reins, momentarily blind. The cowboy fired at the other rider. The shot punched the knight, and the horse reared. The man toppled sideways, hitting dirt with a scream. The widow seized the cowboy's sleeve. "Now!" She hauled him higher up the slope. Behind, the fallen rider groaned, dragging himself up. The other wheeled his horse, fumbling for his pistol. The stranger's second shot rang true. The rider jerked back, body sliding from the saddle. His horse bolted, torch bouncing away in sparks. The cowboy stumbled at the ridgetop, chest heaving, legs weak. "God Almighty!" The widow bent, snatched her knife from dirt, wiped it clean on her skirt. "God didn't ride with us. We carry this alone." The stranger emerged from shadows, calm despite smoke curling off his coat. "Not alone, but patience isn't gone. He'll shadow the rear." The cowboy wheeled, peering into the basin. Fire still blazed, smoke twisting. No figures moved, but he felt it, the weight of eyes. He muttered, "He's still down there." "Watching." The widow's gaze stayed west. "Then let him watch. We move faster than his ink." The cowboy almost laughed. Bitter. "Ink. That ledger's written in blood." Her eyes flicked to him. "So right back." They moved again, cresting into open plain. The night stretched wide, sage and dust rolling endless. The fire behind glowed faint, a dying wound. But ahead, silhouettes, more riders. The stranger cursed low. "Caldwell's thrown the rest forward. He doesn't want her knife, he wants her silence." The cowboy's grip tightened on his rifle. "How many?" "Enough," the stranger said, flat. The widow turned, her shadow long in moonlight. She met the cowboy's eyes. "This is where you stop running." He froze. "What do you mean?" "You asked truth. Truth means choice. Do you stand, or do you beg another man's paper to carry you?" His throat went dry. "I never—" "Then prove it." She pressed the knife into his palm, the hilt slick with her sweat. "Not vows, not pity. Stand." The riders advanced, spread wide, torches swaying. Their spurs jingled like chains in the still night. The cowboy's chest heaved. He felt the knife heavy in one hand, the rifle heavier in the other. For a heartbeat, he wanted to drop both, to run into the sage. But the graves pulled him back, the stones, the char, the patient smile. He lifted the rifle, shoulders steadying. His voice cracked, but he forced words out. "If this is the ledger, then I'll write with you." The widow's eyes gleamed, sharp as steel. "Then let's carve." The stranger reloaded, chambers clicking. "They'll rush on signal." Hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Torches swayed higher. Somewhere in the dark, a whistle shrieked. The charge came. Dust rose. Flames leapt. The widow's blade caught moonlight. The cowboy's rifle kicked. The stranger's pistol cracked like thunder, the plain lit with fire and blood, and through it a shadow lingered, still, silent, waiting. The patient one. The plain erupted. Torches swung wild as the riders charged, dust and flame tangling in the night air. The cowboy's rifle barked, jarring his shoulder, the shot tearing into the dark. A rider toppled sideways, spurs catching in stirrups before the horse dragged him screaming across the sage. The widow lunged low, her blade flashing. She slashed through a horse's reins, sending the beast bolting and its rider crashing into the dirt. Sand sprayed, men cursed, bullets sang past ears. The cowboy fired again, lever snapping, barrel smoking hot. He wasn't aiming anymore, he was surviving. Each shot felt like a heartbeat ripped from his chest. The stranger's pistol cracked steady above them, methodical, measured. One shot, pause, another. Each landed. Each silenced a shout, but still they came. The cowboy's ankle gave as he stumbled back, nearly dropping the rifle. The widow grabbed his arm, yanking him upright just as a rider swung down with a club. She ducked, knife slashing his thigh. He howled, falling into his own horse's path. The cowboy gasped, "We can't hold, there's too many." Her voice was iron. "Hold anyway." Bullets hissed through sage, sparks flew as lead struck stone. The widow whirled, blade carving the air, movements too fast for grief, too sharp for fear. The cowboy felt the ground vibrating under hooves. His rifle jammed, lever stuck. He cursed, fumbling, hands shaking. Then he saw him, the patient one, astride a dark horse just beyond torchlight, calm, still. He didn't charge. He didn't shout. He only watched, pistol resting easy against his thigh. The cowboy froze. The widow noticed too. Her breath hitched. The stranger spat dust, firing again from the ridge. "He's here." The cowboy's throat closed. "Why doesn't he ride in?" The widow's eyes flicked to the graves far behind them, then back to the calm shadow. "Because he doesn't have to." Suddenly, a rider burst from smoke, pistol flashing. The cowboy ducked, felt heat singe his cheek, then swung the rifle like a club, butt cracking against the man's jaw. The rider dropped, blood spraying. The widow grabbed the cowboy's torch, hurling it into a rider's saddle. Fire clung to leather, spread to the horse's mane. Screams cut the air, man and beast. The cowboy stared, chest heaving. "You burn everything." Her reply was flat. "Everything burns already." The stranger fired again. Click. Empty. His voice rang out sharp. "4 left." But the cowboy knew 4 was too many. His rifle jammed, his ankle failing, lungs raw. Then the whistle came. Not the riders, the patients. Short, sharp, final. The riders stopped mid-charge, torches lowered. Smoke curled around them, uneasy. The patient one dismounted at last, boots crunching sage. Calm, measured. He holstered his pistol, as if no longer needed. The cowboy's gut twisted. Why's he putting it away? The widow's grip on her knife tightened. Because the killing's already chosen. The patient one walked forward, each step deliberate. The other riders parted for him like cattle shifting from a wolf's path. His eyes never left the cowboy. The cowboy's hands shook. "He's looking at me," the widow hissed. "Don't break." The patient one stopped 10 paces away. His voice, when it came, was low, calm, terrible. "Ledger's full tonight. 1 line left, yours." The cowboy's breath hitched. "Why me?" "Because she's already written," the patient said. His eyes flicked to the widow. "But you're still deciding if ink's worth blood." The widow stepped forward, knife raised. "He stands with me." The patient's faint smile cut the night. "We'll see." He snapped his fingers. A rider hurled a lasso. The loop hissed through the air, aiming for the cowboy's throat. The cowboy ducked, stumbling. The rope caught his shoulder, tightening. He screamed, yanking back, rifle tumbling from his grip. The widow slashed the rope in one clean motion. Fibers snapped. She shoved him behind her, knife dripping in moonlight. The patient one didn't move, didn't flinch, only spoke, calm as always. "Run if you like. Graves will wait." The cowboy's chest burned. His hands trembled on empty air where his rifle had fallen. He whispered, "Broken. I can't." The widow snarled, cutting him short. "You can, or you're dead already." The patient one tilted his head, smile deepening. Then he stepped closer. The night felt suddenly narrow, suffocating. The cowboy realized this wasn't just a fight, it was a reckoning. And in the next breath, someone would break. The patient one stepped closer, boots whispering through sage. 10 paces, 8. His pistol hung easy at his thigh, as if it were a thought he hadn't quite decided to have. "Ledger's got a blank line," he said. "Night's almost over. Sign it." The cowboy's mouth was dry as sand. His rifle lay in the dirt where the lasso had torn it loose. His hands shook, empty. The widow slid a half step in front of him, knife raised. "He's not yours." The patient's smile was thin. "Everyone's someone's." The stranger called from the ridge, voice taut. "Careful. He doesn't miss at this distance." The cowboy felt the breath leave him. Running would be easy. Easier than standing in moonlight with a man whose calm could cut. He looked at the widow's knife, the nicked hilt, the shallow 5th notch waiting. "Sign it," the patient repeated, chin lifting, "or I'll write it for you." The cowboy reached for the knife. The widow didn't flinch. She flipped the hilt into his palm without taking her eyes off the patient. "Don't shake," she said. He didn't. He dragged steel across his own cheek, clean and shallow, a red line blooming under his eye. Blood ticked down to his jaw. The patient's smile bent. "Just a hair." "That all you brought?" The cowboy answered by pressing 2 fingers to the cut and streaking the blood across his chest, over the shirt he'd married in. "I carry," he said. His voice didn't crack this time. The widow's breath hitched, not fear, something like approval. "Now you mean it." The patient rolled his wrist, the pistol's muzzle nudging up. "Meaning's cheap." The cowboy dipped, scooped a handful of dust, and flung it. Not at the man's eyes, too far, but low at his boots. The puff made him blink anyway. The muzzle twitched. The stranger's shot snapped from the ridge. A spark leapt off the patient's spur. He slid sideways, smooth as water, and the bullet hissed past. "Close," the stranger muttered. "Closer," the widow said. The cowboy's heel bumped something in the sage, the cut coil from the rope that had snared him. He grabbed the remnant without looking, spun it in his hand. Muscle memory woke in his wrist. Years of throwing at skittish calves when daylight didn't give him time for tidy. The patient's smile returned. Faint. "Ranch tricks won't—" The loop hissed. It bit his gun wrist clean, yanking it down. His pistol barked into the dirt, spurting a fountain of dust at his boots. The cowboy wrenched hard, twisting the rope. The patient stumbled half-step, balance broken for the first time all night. The widow moved. She was already there when he needed her, steel at the patient's throat, breath steady. "Ledger reads 2 ways," she said. "Yours first." The patient didn't blink. He let the pistol fall, fingers loosening, and the smile never touched his eyes. "You think I came alone?" The cowboy felt it more than heard it, the soft grind of a boot behind them, the press of breath that didn't belong. He started to turn. "Don't," the patient said softly. "He won't miss either." The widow's blade touched skin. "Call him off." "Can't," the patient murmured. "He doesn't hear me. He hears pay." The stranger's voice cut the dark. "I see him." "Don't shoot," the widow snapped. "He's behind us." The rope burned the cowboy's palm as the patient flexed his wrist against it. Calm, always calm. "You can cut me," he said. "You won't. Not here. Not with him watching who you are." The widow's jaw tightened. He already knows. The cowboy pulled harder, dragging the patient's arm across his own chest. "Drop the second gun," he said. The patient chuckled. "Which one?" Something cold clicked in the grass. A derringer, small as a sin, slid from the patient's sleeve and hit the dirt between their boots. He hadn't looked at it to drop it. He was letting them see one thing so they'd forget to look for another. The stranger hissed, "Left pocket." The cowboy yanked the rope and drove his shoulder into the patient's ribs. The world slammed into a knot of limbs and sage. The widow's knife never left the throat it kissed. The patient exhaled once, slow. Then his left knee shot up, a precise hammer into the cowboy's thigh. Pain lit fire through bone. The rope slackened. He used that half-inch. His free hand slid, and a stubby iron flashed from his vest. Third piece, flat and ugly. Not a pistol, a pepper box. "Down!" the stranger roared. The widow shoved the cowboy sideways and lunged toward the blast at the same time, blade angling for the wrist. The pepper box boomed, 4 barrels coughing smoke at once. The night split. Horses shrieked. A torch fell and rolled, painting sage with orange. The cowboy hit dirt, ears ringing, mouth full of ash. He clawed for the rope, for the knife, for anything that wasn't fear. The widow staggered, then held, still on her feet, blade still at the patient's throat. Smoke curled around her hair. Blood dotted her sleeve, not her throat, not her heart. The patient's breath warmed the knife's edge. "That's one," he whispered. 3 more. The cowboy surged, driving his forearm across the patient's elbow, pinning him. "Drop it!" The pepper box clanged from the patient's fingers. He let it go like it weighed nothing. His eyes never left the widow's. "You married a storm," he told the cowboy, almost gentle. "Storms don't stop. They drown men with good intentions first." "Then learn to swim," the cowboy rasped. The patient's smile came back, small and true. "I already did." His shoulder snapped forward with serpentine speed. The headbutt cracked the bridge of the cowboy's nose, white light, hot blood. Then he twisted under the rope, not escaping, just changing angles. The widow tracked him, blade a breath from cutting deep. "Don't," the stranger warned from the dark. "He's baiting her hand high." A 4th sound cut them all, the clean, final click of a hammer behind the widow's back. Not the patient's, behind her. Close enough to smell the man's tobacco. The other gun they'd missed. "Move and she drops," a new voice said, soft, pleased. The widow didn't turn. Neither did the patient. They both smiled, like 2 gamblers who liked the shape of risk. The cowboy looked up through blood and blur and saw the barrel touch the widow's spine. "Easy," he said, voice raw. "Easy's for daylight," the new voice murmured. The patient breathed against the knife. Ledger closes. The cowboy had 1 heartbeat to decide. Let the blade fall and risk the shot, or shove, or beg, or run. He chose. He shoved. The knife slipped, and the gun behind the widow fired. The shot cracked like a split bone. The widow lurched forward, blade carving air. For a heartbeat the cowboy thought she'd fallen, but her knife kissed skin, slicing a shallow red smile across the patient's throat. Not deep, not fatal, but enough to stagger him back. The man behind her cursed. His bullet had gone wide, grazing her shoulder instead of tearing her down. She spun, blood streaking her arm, knife ready. The cowboy saw him, a rider with a grey beard and a grin too wide for the work of killing. His pistol was already rising again. The cowboy didn't think. He threw himself at the man's legs. They crashed into the dirt, pistol firing wild into the night. The widow finished it. 1 slash across the beard, another through his chest. The grin vanished. He folded into the dust. The cowboy rolled onto his back, chest heaving, face a mask of blood. "You're bleeding," he rasped. The widow didn't look at her shoulder. "So are you." Her knife was still steady, still wet. The patient pressed his palm to his throat, blood staining his fingers, and yet he was smiling. "Ledger's almost full now," the stranger shouted from the ridge. "He's not done." He wasn't. The patient stepped closer again, calm despite the cut. His eyes burned in the smoke, fixed on the cowboy. "You think 1 wound ends it? You think Ledger closes without balance?" The cowboy forced himself up, swaying. His ankle throbbed, his nose bled, his thigh ached where the knee had driven in. Every part of him screamed to lie down, to quit. But the widow's gaze pinned him upright. She whispered, low enough for him alone, "Stand, or I bury you." The cowboy clenched the rope still tangled in his fist. He tightened it, drawing it taut. "No more running," he said. His voice was steadier than he felt. "Not tonight." The patient tilted his head, amused. "Then carve." He lunged. It wasn't wild. It was surgical, precise. Hand striking the cowboy's throat, other arm wrenching for the knife. The widow parried, steel clanging. Sparks sprayed in moonlight. She shoved him back a step, but his weight was a storm. He pressed, forcing her down, their blades locked, metal shrieking. The cowboy saw it, her knife angling, his wrist twisting, the patient's blade inching toward her ribs. Too fast, too strong. She'd never stop him alone. The cowboy roared, swinging the rope around the man's neck. He hauled back, dragging with all the weight his battered body still carried. The patient choked, staggered, but didn't fall. He twisted, using the pull to drag the cowboy forward instead of breaking free. They slammed together, 3 bodies locked in firelight, grunts and curses lost in the storm. "Hold him!" the widow shouted. The cowboy tightened his grip, rope biting into his palm, forearms burning. "Cut him!" he yelled. The widow hesitated, just long enough to see his face, to know what cutting would mean. Not just the patient, maybe him too. The rope was too tight, too close. Steel didn't care whose flesh it found. The patient's voice rasped, low and strangled. "Do it, bury us both, Ledger loves balance." The cowboy snarled through blood. "Not tonight." He twisted hard, throwing his weight sideways. The 3 of them crashed into the dirt. Dust exploded. The widow landed clear, blade still in her grip. The cowboy and patient rolled, rope tightening around the throat. The patient clawed at it, eyes narrowing, calm, cracking at last. His smile faltered. For the first time he looked human, angry, desperate, mortal. The cowboy tightened harder, every muscle straining, pain searing through his ankle, his thigh, his ribs. He locked his jaw and pulled until the man's breath rattled, until his fingers weakened. The widow dropped to her knees beside them, knife poised. "Say the word." The cowboy met her eyes. For once he didn't feel small, he didn't feel desperate, he felt steady. "Do it." Her blade plunged. The patient stiffened, jerked, then went still. The rope slackened. The cowboy fell back, chest heaving, lungs tearing at the night air. Silence rolled over the plain. The riders who had survived scattered into the smoke, spurring their horses away. No whistle came, no calm voice followed. The ledger was closed. The widow wiped her blade on her skirt. "You carried." The cowboy lay staring at the stars, rope still tangled in his bleeding hands. "We carried," he said. The stranger approached from the ridge, gun low, eyes wary. "He's finished," he muttered, "but he'll ride shadows in your head for years." The cowboy sat up, winced, and looked at the widow. "Then I'll ride them with her." The widow didn't smile, not fully, but she reached down and pulled him to his feet. Her hand was steady, strong, alive. Behind them, the fire died slow. The ledger lay in ashes, but dawn was coming, and with it, new debts waiting to be written. The plain was quiet now, smoke drifting low across the sage, broken only by the hiss of dying torches and the shuffle of horses too spooked to graze. The cowboy stood with the rope slack in his hands, the widow's knife still glinting in the half-light. The patient lay sprawled in dust, his eyes open but unseeing, that ghost of a smile still frozen on his lips. His blood soaked into the ground like ink sealing a ledger. The widow pressed her hand against her shoulder where the bullet had grazed her, face pale but jaw locked. The cowboy moved toward her, almost reaching out, then stopped short. His palm still dripped blood, and he didn't know if it was his or the patient's. "You should sit," he said, voice ragged. She shook her head. "We can't stay here." The stranger descended from the ridge, rifle slung, eyes scanning the horizon. "She's right, sun's not far." Riders might circle back. Coyotes, too. Best bury him shallow and move. The cowboy looked down at the patient, unease crawling his spine. Even dead, the man seemed deliberate, as if he had chosen the shape of his fall. "No marker," the cowboy muttered. The widow's gaze was sharp. "Ledger doesn't deserve one." Together, they dragged the body to a ditch cut by spring rains. The cowboy lowered him in, shoveling dirt with his hands. Each scoop weighed like guilt. Each breath smelled of smoke and blood. When it was done, the widow whispered something in Apache, words the cowboy didn't know, low and final. She turned without looking back. The cowboy followed her to the horses, ankle throbbing, ribs screaming. He thought the night was finished. It wasn't. A sound rose on the wind, hooves, slow, deliberate. Not many. One, maybe two. The widow stiffened, knife already in her grip. The stranger raised his rifle. The cowboy bent, pain shooting through him, and pulled his rifle from the dirt, chambering around with shaking hands. From the smoke came a single rider, tall in the saddle, face half hidden by a bandana. He didn't hold a torch. He didn't need one. Moonlight caught the badge pinned to his chest. A lawman. The cowboy's stomach turned cold. The patient had promised graves. Maybe the law was the final shovel. The rider reined in 10 paces away. His voice carried low and even. Heard the shooting. Who fell? No one spoke. The lawman's eyes cut from the widow's bloody knife to the cowboy's torn shirt, then to the mound of fresh dirt behind them. Ledger's man. The stranger spat dust. Ledger's done. The lawman dismounted slow, boots crunching. He didn't draw, he didn't need to. His badge gleamed brighter than any barrel. "That true?" he asked the cowboy directly. The cowboy's throat worked. His first instinct was to deny, to bury words deeper than the body. But the widow's eyes burned on him. She had demanded he stand. To lie now would be to kneel again. "It's true," he said, voice steady. "He came for me. We ended it." The lawman's gaze lingered, long, heavy. Then he nodded once. Ledger always ends the same. He swung back into the saddle. "Bury your dead. Leave by dawn. Don't be here when I ride back." The widow's grip tightened on her knife. "Why let us go?" The lawman looked at her, then at the cowboy. "Because balance was paid, but debts don't vanish. You'll carry them." He tugged his reins. His horse turned. Hooves faded into sage. The night was theirs again. The cowboy exhaled, knees threatening to give. "That close," he whispered. The widow sheathed her knife, finally trembling. Not from fear, from release. "Closer than you know." They sat together on the cabin steps until dawn cracked pale across the horizon. The stranger brewed coffee over coals, bitter and thin. No one spoke. When light finally touched the plain, the widow rose. Her eyes were darker than night, but clearer than they'd been since he'd met her. "We move," she said. "Graves behind us, miles ahead." The cowboy nodded. He limped to his horse, rope still hanging from his palm. His face burned where the cut had dried, blood marking him different than before. The stranger studied him. "Ledger's men are finished, but others will come. You ready for that?" The cowboy swung into the saddle, pain ripping through his body. He looked at the widow, steady beside him, her knife strapped to her hip, the shallow cut on her arm staining her sleeve. "I wasn't ready yesterday," he said, "but today, I'll carry." The widow mounted too, eyes meeting his. "Then we ride." The three of them turned west, sun breaking clean behind them, painting the sky in fire and dust. The ledger was closed, but the world would keep writing. And this time, they'd hold the pen. And so, the desperate cowboy and the Apache widow walked away from a night soaked in blood, carrying scars that would never fade, but also carrying each other. Some debts can't be erased, but they can be shared. If this story struck you, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more tales of survival, loyalty, and the hidden strength of those the world underestimates. And when you're ready for the next journey, watch the story on your screen now. You won't believe what happened there.